Hello, family. How are you today? My name is Quanisha Johnson. I'm a licensed counselor and educator. And today I am bringing to you our third conversation, our third topic in our series. We're on number 4. We've been doing this. This is our 4th month, and we're in session number 3. And today's conversation is going to be all about self-love. So let me share my screen with you. And let's start talking about what that looks like, what that means. Okay, self-love. So as I stated before, we are this month talking about relationships. We've discussed family, we've discussed the Black woman, we've discussed our children, and now we are just talking about just relationships. Last week, we talked about specifically communication and what that looked like and the importance of communication in relationships. And it was entitled last week, The Dance of Communication, because we said communication was like a dance, a rhythm, right? When you communicate with one another. And so this week, under the topic of fostering healthy relationships between Black men and Black women, today's title is Black Love Starts with Self-Love. And so today I want to talk more about what self-love looks like. And if we're going to talk about relationships and the beauty of Black love, we have to start that conversation with how we love ourselves. So in order to be in relationship, there takes 2 people. And so 2 people coming together make the relationship. And so they're 2 individuals. So we're going to talk today about what self-love looks like and what is the connection of self-love and healthy relationships. Okay, so what exactly is self-love? We hear this, like, what does it mean? So I always define everything, even if it's simply just from the dictionary, like what is the dictionary saying and how are the different dictionary definitions applicable to life? How can we dissect them? Do those definitions make sense to us culturally? And so Merriam-Webster, I found their definition, which states that self-love was an appreciation of one's own worth or virtue. True, correct, right? Self-love, you're appreciating your worth, your virtue. Think that's great. It also stated it's the proper regard for and attention to one's own happiness or well-being. And I love that as well, because it's the proper regard. And it was interesting in this definition, it went down the line and it talks about, which I don't have here, the importance of not being, it said in the definition, self-love, and it talks about loving yourself too much. And so here, I suppose the connection is that there's this proper regard for, like, you're going to regard your own being and who you are and your own personal happiness and your well-being. And I like that term, well-being, being well. Like, what does that take for you? And even I can hone in on the one's own worth, which means it's an individual process, self-love. How we love ourselves is individual. It is not predicated upon what someone else says or what it looks like for someone else. So your one's own worth and that proper regard for and attention to your own happiness, there's that word again, own, belonging to you, or your well-being. The Brain and Behavior Research Foundation had another definition I liked, and it says a state of appreciation for oneself that grows from actions that support our physical, psychological, and spiritual growth. Let's pause there. A state of appreciation for one's own self. Think about that word appreciate and what it means. And when you tell someone you appreciate them. So I just want you to think about that word. So we're wanting you with self-love to appreciate yourself. And and then the next part says that appreciation for yourself, it grows bigger. And how? Through action. So I love the connection of And this, like I said, is from Brain and Behavior, this research foundation. And so the connection of I appreciate myself, and that appreciation for myself grows from action, from doing. It's just not simply from being, but it comes and grows from doing that support your physical, psychological, and spiritual growth. Actions that support that. So what actions, I'm going to ask you today, what actions in terms of the growth of your physical, psychological, and spiritual growth are you performing? Self-love, and it goes on to say, means having a high regard for your own well-being and happiness. There's that term again, well-being and happiness, the same thing as the Merriam-Webster definition. And so ultimately, this is what self-love looks like. I love already that we're saying it's something that you do. It's just not something that you are. Because we hear the term thrown around a lot, gotta love yourself. And for many, they don't know what that looks like and what that means. It's just something that we say. And we have to, as people, really get over the idea of telling people to do something without giving them the proper support. And that proper support may come with instruction, may come with tips, may come with strategies, techniques. We may model something. It's just like when we tell kids to just, oh, you got to be confident, and not really kind of explaining what it means for them to be confident and what that looks like and what does it take. And we're just assuming it's just a feeling. And if we say it to them, they're going to get it. So I love the theme today of love and of action and of doing and it growing. I'm appreciating myself, and that appreciation grows through the actions that I do to support that. How do I take care of my physical? How do I take care of my psychological? How do I take care of my spiritual? How do I take care of all of those parts of me to grow that appreciation? So all of those things I do signify that I have this love for myself and I hold myself in a high regard. Self-love also from the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation stated, means taking care of your own needs and I underlined, they didn't underline this, I did, and not sacrificing your well-being to please others. So I want to be very clear here. I totally believe as a mother, as a caregiver, as a therapist, as an educator, as a lover of people, that there are opportunities and times where you sacrifice something. I will give my children, if I have one bottle of water, and one of my children are thirsty, I know that I, as an adult, can just wait until I get some water. But they are, as children, they may feel that I need to have it now. And if I have a bottle, I'd give it to them. There may be situations where I'm in a line and I let someone get in front of me because I just want to be nice in the grocery line. So maybe I want to get out of there, but I think it's a nice gesture. So I'm sacrificing a little bit of my time to care for a fellow man. So we're not talking about selfishness. We're talking about self-love, meaning taking care of your needs. And here we go, not sacrificing your well-being. So I can make sure I can do for others. I can give someone something that I have. I could share my time. I could share my resources. I can give up my resources, but I don't need to sacrifice my well-being. I don't need to sacrifice my well-being in order and as a means to please someone else. So that is, I thought, was very important. When we're talking about self-love, we have to make sure that we're remembering that it's important to take care of our own needs. When we talked about this a few weeks ago, I believe in the sessions where we were talking about the Black woman, we talked about the idea or the concept of being on the airplane and the oxygen mask coming down. And of course, you're naturally inclined to, especially if you're having someone next to you that you care for, a child, a loved one, to try to figure out if something were to go wrong with the plane, how can I help the person I love, especially if it's a small child, because you're sacrificing, right? As a parent, you want to make sure your children are good. So the oxygen mask, as it drops down, you're going to be reminded before your flight takes off to put it on your face first, and then you have the capacity to help who's next to you. So this connects for me because it doesn't mean that I'm not taking care of my loved one next to me expeditiously to the best of my ability if something were to go wrong with the plane. However, I can't do that if I have no oxygen. And so self-love means I need to take care of my needs, because when I take care of my needs, in fact, it helps me take care of others better and do more for others. If I have nothing left within me, no oxygen, I can't help with others. So just being mindful of not sacrificing your well-being, love, care, not sacrificing your well-being. There are going to be things that you're going to sacrifice and go, okay, I can give that up. I can do without that. I always give parenting as an example. Oh, my child needs this XYZ thing. I won't get this thing for myself because they really need that thing. They need braces. So I'm going to it's expensive. So we're going to forego this thing, or I'm not going to get this thing because I want my child to have the braces. Fine. But we're talking about the sacrificing of your well-being. And that's what is not a representation of self-love when you're doing something like that, when your well-being is sacrificed as a means to please someone else. So like, we talked about what self-love was or is rather. And so like, what gets in the way of loving yourself? Because if we think back at it, doesn't sound so hard. I appreciate myself. Someone may go, okay, check, I do that. And do I take care of my psychological, my physical well-being? Check. And you may in your mental checkbox go, oh, I do some of these things to love myself. But what gets in the way of that? What stops us or creates some sort of barrier to us loving ourselves? And so the first thing I have here are surprisingly enough, we are born into families and we learn a lot about everything. Your parents are your first teachers. You learn everything, even from just kind of being a newborn, your toddler phase. You learn so much just from absorbing your environment, being around your family. So how is your family a barrier? And I have also the intergenerational patterns, because in a lot of cases, we are absorbing as children our environments, and we're watching the adults in our life, how they love themselves or how they demonstrate love for themselves. And as a result, we are absorbing those habits, those behaviors, and we're taking, in many cases, those things on. And then that is our first lesson about how do we love ourselves. So if when I think back to growing up, and I'm thinking about being raised in a household with a grandma, with a grandma who loved me tremendously and dearly. But I often reflect on watching her care for everyone, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, her own children, and just thinking like, what was a demonstration of self-love? Not witnessing her ever really do a lot for herself and give up a lot for everyone else, but not taking the time for even personal care, for psychological well-being, for spiritual well-being, for just caring, and then being in an environment when you just are absorbing that and watching that. And so I'm very blessed to be in the field that I am and learn so much, but ultimately just understanding how patterns are passed down. Now, does that mean my grandma sat us down and go, okay, you're gonna not do this for yourself, you're going to sacrifice everything and just for others and not do anything for yourself? But you absorb things, you absorb your environment, things are passed down, behaviors, patterns are passed from generation to generation. So you watch someone do things and it's just normal to you. Your normal in your home growing up is your normal. It belongs to you. If you see something, and sometimes I've heard stories of people going outside of their home and they're like, that was what's normal to me. Someone's looking at them for a behavior or a habit. To them, they're like, what did I do? And to someone else, because in their home, something else went on. So everyone has a different state of normal within the confines of the home they grow up in. So your family, or what the home you grow up in may not have modeled or taught what that looks like. To go a step further, in many homes which there is abuse, some way, shape, or form, how a child was treated within that home, what's being abused verbally, mentally, physically, could be the barrier to that individual loving themselves, because they don't see the worthiness. So if my body was violated, if I was told daily that I was nothing, or never complimented, or just spoken down to and emotionally abused and treated a certain way, I'm going to think that that's the way that I'm supposed to be treated. That's my normal. It's not normal, but that would be my normal, because that's just what I'm used to. That's what I grew up in. And that's the story of many people. And so ultimately, what's the barrier to self-love? Sometimes our family. Sometimes those patterns pass down. And so we have to be mindful of that. And the history of being Black in the United States is a barrier in itself. The history of who we are as a people and how we traditionally, historically rather, have been treated, to be dehumanized and told that we're just not good enough, we're not worthy, you're not even human. So in all of the years that have passed by, it's just in the systemic racism, and just things, like I said, racism embedded into systems. And so there's those barriers that are existing in different types of systems that we have to be involved in, like school, like work. And it's challenging for us. So those are barriers, because if you are treated a certain way, and your grandparents and your mother and their parents and their parents, and so there's treatment that's passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. And so it's what we talked about a few sessions ago, epigenetic trauma, like how those things are passed down, like what happened to us, what was that trauma, how was it passed down? So those things that we experience just simply from being Black in the United States are absolutely barriers to our self-love. Watching being present in a time and watching the media and seeing how we're treated, and just in how the news, how social media, how movies, how we're portrayed, how we're talked to, how our bodies don't seem to be of any value, watching murder. Those are barriers to self-love, because you see yourself, even though it's not you in those situations, you see yourself. And so if you have this level of just being, just Black fatigue, just being fatigued because there's something different all of the time that you're dealing with as a Black person in the United States. And are they going to accept my hair? Are they going to accept my skin? How I'm treated at my job, at school, and just if you're a parent and you have a teenager or a child who drives, we're going to have a certain conversation that talk about what happens if you get pulled over, and just kind of fatigued by life. It could just kind of wear on you. And so ultimately that history is a barrier. It's a barrier, and a barrier is something that we can remove. We can move out the way, but just understanding what the barriers are and what gets in our way of how we see ourselves, how we take care of ourselves, how we nurture ourselves, how we love ourselves. And I have here the isms. And I have, of course, we could discuss a little bit about racism and being one of the biggest isms. So when I say a barrier, and an ism, I'm meaning also every ism you can think about, sexism, right? So we're talking about just racism, sexism, any ism. Even earlier, we talked about in one of the definitions from Merriam-Webster, it said that proper regard for loving yourself. What could also be a barrier to your self-love is dealing with someone who loves themselves so much that they see it fit to downplay who you are. And that ism in that situation is narcissism, where someone who is a narcissist will love themselves or appear to, right? Because it really isn't a true demonstration of self-love, to put you down, berate you, treat you less than, as a means to demonstrate love for themselves, even though they don't love themselves. And so ultimately the isms can be barriers. All of the isms you can put in that place can be barriers. Capitalism, the idea of like my worthiness because of my maybe financial worth, how much I have, what type of job I have and how much it pays, and so all of the isms being a barrier to how I see myself. If I don't have this job and make this kind of amount of money, if I don't drive this car, if I don't have these assets or these things, am I less than? Am I being treated less than? Does society see me different? Do people treat me different as a result of what I have? So these things they're all possibly barriers to how we love ourselves, to us appreciating ourselves and feeling worthy. We talked about before the strong Black woman schema, just carrying around that idea that we have to sacrifice ourselves and just in order to take care of others. And that idea of being strong, that label, that we're not allowed to be vulnerable, that we can bear the weight of the world as a Black women on our shoulders, and we'll be okay. You're okay because you're strong. You can do it. You don't worry. You got it. You're okay. I can think of many situations where people who love me, who love and care about me, when I displayed vulnerability or feeling overwhelmed, instead of listening or encouraging me to take a break, I was told, you can do it. Keep going. Don't stop. When I was told, oh, I need to take a day off. Oh, you can do it. Don't take a day off. True story. And so ultimately, and there's no malice at all. I know the person who cares about me didn't mean anything by it, but we're just passing something down, passing a message I know they received about going and going and going and doing and not stopping to take care of yourself. Then we have this idea of toxic masculinity, because remember, our theme is relationships. So we're talking about self-love, and we can look at the Black woman, and then we can look at something that is a barrier for the Black man. And so this idea of toxic masculinity is harmful to men, but it's also harmful to women as well. And so it doesn't allow, it's this kind of cultural, just kind of pressure for men to behave in a certain way, to not be vulnerable and to not seek help and to have this power. And we know there are a lot of connections to this from the isms that I just mentioned, and from the history of being Black in the United States. So there's a lot of this, that there's a connection of that, the toxic masculinity with that, but we're not going to be in a place today to condone something. We want to understand where things come from without condoning. But in terms of self-love, this idea of the strong Black woman, this idea of toxic masculinity are absolutely barriers to relationships. So how we see each other, how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves, how we see ourselves. So I wanted to just kind of like bring those two things to light, because I think they're very important things that are often barriers to self-love. And so now just the idea of everything that I talked about, just gotta unlearn some things. And the idea of unlearning is just kind of discarding, throwing away things that we've learned that are false, undoing some things, because in many cases we are indoctrinated We are indoctrinated about a lot of things. We get information and we don't question it at all. And so a lot of things about how we see ourselves, how we take care of ourselves, how we see others, and our responsibility to take care of others, and what that looks like in relation to our responsibility to ourselves. We learn a lot. And like I said, a lot, not in a way to blame. Family starts in family, it's in the community, society, it's the history of our country. And so it's so important to those things that are not true. We're going to toss them out. We're going to unlearn. We're going to put new practices in. So when we think about loving ourselves as Black women, for example, and so many years being told that our hair, our natural hair isn't beautiful. It isn't beautiful. It shouldn't look this way. It's unkempt, all of these negative things. And although we've heard them so much and we are so tired, it is unlearning, because those things are false. We're going to toss it out. We're going to do the work because they had an impact. It has an impact on us. We won't just toss things away as if they don't exist, but we want to discard things that are false, because that is absolutely a falsehood. And so this idea of who we are as a people and how we deserve to be treated, because traditionally we were treated, historically treated a certain way, we have to just say it's absolutely untrue, and just do the work to nurture and grow ourselves and to heal, unlearning some things, some ideas, and really start really doing the work of loving ourselves. So let's talk about some steps to practice self-love and what that actually looks like. How do we practice self-love? So the first thing that we want to do in this journey of practicing self-love is we want to evaluate where we are. So that's what I want you to do. Evaluate where you are. The only way to really identify things that we need to change or do better with, we have to do a self-evaluation. Self-love is self-awareness. So when I say evaluate, it's looking at all of those in the beginning, the conversations about the barriers, what that looks like, kind of looking at, do I appreciate myself, and what does that look like? That definition that states that it's that state of appreciation for oneself from actions that support my physical, psychological, and spiritual growth. So taking that and saying, in relation to myself, am I doing things that support those areas of my life? Am I having a high regard for myself and my well-being and my happiness? Am I taking care of my own needs and not sacrificing my well-being? Asking those questions. We're doing evaluation. What are my barriers? Like, what did I actually learn about self-love? What did I learn about loving myself in relation to the definitions that we discussed earlier? What did I learn? Who did I learn it from? What did it look like in my family? So as a result, where am I with it? So we got to evaluate where we are in this journey of self-love. Are we appreciating our own worth? And remember, we're not going to simplify self-love by saying it's just self-love means love yourself. Because we're saying we're gonna understand what that means and what that looks like. And so are we having that proper regard and attention for our happiness and our well-being? How do we take care of ourselves? It's an action. The more that we do, we increase it. We're doing. Are we doing that? Like I said, we're identifying where we are in the process. What actions are we walking around saying that that we love ourselves and not doing the work that demonstrates that? The next thing is just the idea of learning about your emotions. It is healthy to experience the range of emotions. And I'm just going to stop right there and just kind of look at the idea of the range of emotions. And so when I say the range, I mean, you're going to experience everything from happiness, sadness, frustration, joy. You're going to be surprised, fearful. You're going to experience all of those things. And so understanding and learning what emotions are, what it feels like when you have certain experiences, that is healthy, that we don't want to be stuck in one emotion. We don't want to be stuck on anger all of the time. And evaluating that first process I talked about. If we are stuck in one emotional space, kind of doing the work, getting support to kind of figure out how to get that moving through. Like what was our experience that had us stuck in an emotional state of fear or an emotional state of anger, and kind of doing the work to figure that out to be healthy. So it's okay to experience the range of emotions and to understand what that looks like, what that feels like, and to be able to, in a healthy way, work through your emotions. Then I have understand what triggers you. And so sometimes we take the word trigger and we replace it with trauma cue, just because of the nature of the word trigger. And just what triggers, what sets that button or that alarm off within you? Being aware of that and not ignoring. I often in these conversations talk about the idea of awareness so much. The awareness is such an important step, because without the awareness, you can't do anything to practice your self-love and demonstrate that and do and nurture yourself. So you have to be aware. And in the conversation we're having about self-love in relationships, when you understand that, what the trauma cues are, or if you want to use the word triggers, what that button goes off, when it goes off, you can better articulate that in your partnership with your partner. You're able to let them know so that they're aware and they're not taken aback or like surprised and they don't understand it. The more that you can communicate what those things are, because you understand them yourself, it makes for a better relationship. But when you don't know, remember, because we said earlier that your normal, how you grew up, your experience is yours. It belongs to you. So just understanding, like, it is not how you respond to something. You may just respond to that and it doesn't mean anything, to you, maybe even negative, but someone else sees it and goes, what was that? And not get it. So the more that you're aware, you can work in partnership with someone. You could let them know, communicate, so that they're not thrown off. They understand, oh, okay, when they're having, when this happens, they may have this reaction. And so maybe this is what I need to do to support them. And so that ties into the possible impact of trauma. And so when we're doing this self-evaluation, we're looking at what things in our life, what trauma is stuck that we can't move through, that hasn't moved through appropriately. And what do we need to do? Do we need to seek the support and help of a therapist trained in trauma that could help us? Because that is a demonstration of loving yourself, understanding that something that you experience has an impact on your well-being, on your safety, on you feeling secure. And if you're not safe, if you don't feel secure, that is absolutely going to impact your relationship. Because remember, our conversation was Black love starts with self-love. So in the idea of talking about being in relationship and this idea of like Black and love and loving one another and being together, it has to start within us and for us. And so just understanding, how did your trauma impact you? Is your trauma something that manifests in your current behaviors? Are there things that you may have been suppressing that you did not deal with? But it's doing the work, and it's work that's good work, because you are preparing. If you're interested in being in a relationship, in a healthy one, doing this work is for you first because you love you, but it also helps in having a healthier relationship dynamic. So learn about your emotions, work through your trauma, get support if you need support. So of course, we're always going to, every time, practice good self-care or recommend in terms of self-love, practicing good self-care, taking care of all parts of you. There are so many aspects of self-care. We know there is psychological self-care, emotional self-care, there's professional self-care, physical self-care, and just like tailoring your plan. Because remember, we talked about the more that you do these things, you have this appreciation for yourself. And so the more that you are doing these things, that appreciation and that love grows. You're nurturing yourself. And so ultimately, this is something that's so important. And your self-care are definitely acts, but I encourage everyone to have a plan. Those very intentional acts are fantastic. I might say, later on tonight, I am going to take a hot shower, burn my candles, read a book, and relax. And I might say that's amazing. And that is a great intentional act, or acts rather. But when I create a plan, I'm working on the present, and that is going to flow into the future. I have a plan that this going forward is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do, because taking care of myself is a priority. Big thing in terms of loving yourself. Loving yourself means loving yourself enough to set those boundaries. We talked about this before. Setting boundaries equals self-care, equals self-love, loving yourself. Boundaries are the things that you will and will not accept from others. You set that line and you go, I will not accept it. And because I assertively say I will not do something, it is not me being mean. It is not me being nasty. And sometimes it's taken that way when we set boundaries. We get a label of having an attitude, being mean, and it's not that. It's understanding what you will and will not accept, because it is healthy for you and your well-being, because you love yourself. So your line is a line that's a hard line. And remember, boundaries are allowed to be flexible. They are, but they're not flexible because you're flip-flopping because somebody likes this and somebody likes that. And maybe I shouldn't say this because this person likes that. We can't do it that way. Boundaries represent the courage to love yourself. This is the important part. Even when others are disappointed, people will be disappointed in your boundaries. The boundaries are for you. The boundaries are for you. There are people in your life that are not going to like them. And it's not for them, even though we're placing a boundary in front of them. It's for your safety, your security, for your well-being. So it shows that you have the courage to love yourself and know that everyone's not going to be like, yes, she said no, she can't do this thing for me, or she says, no, she can't pick me up because she's resting and, she's a new mom and she was up all night. So she said no, and I don't like it because I want her to pick me up. I want her to drive over here, but I'm going to accept it because I have no choice. So you have to have the courage to love yourself. And that person on the receiving end may be disappointed, but that's okay. Boundaries mean that you are listening to yourself and your needs. Very, very important to understand that in the evaluation process of how do I love myself? Am I loving myself the way that I am supposed to? Do I understand that I'm worthy, that I have value? Do I understand what appreciating myself looks like? Asking yourself all of those questions, waiting for yourself to find the answer. If you don't have an answer, doing some reflection to understand what the answers to those questions are. Listening to yourself and your needs. So I encourage my clients all the time to do daily check-ins. Check in with yourself. Talk to yourself, like I would say, Quanisha, what are you in need of? And sometimes simply when I ask myself that, I literally just say, you are thirsty. You didn't even drink water in hours and you feel dehydrated. Drink some water. So it would the question is, what do you need? And if I were to like say, oh, you are so thirsty, and then I would go, but I don't have time to get water, I'll get some later. So remember, listening to yourself and your needs. Very important aspect of self-love, of setting boundaries, of going, I can do this extra thing for for someone. I absolutely have the capacity. I'm a lover, I'm a doer, I'm a friend, I'm a support system. I am all of those things. But that does not negate the fact that I can't do it right now because I need to drink water or I need to take care of my body in some way. So ultimately, boundaries are healthy and they mean that you are listening to what you're in need of. It is not, we're not offending someone because we love ourselves. If there's anger, discomfort, resentment, those are signs that there are poor boundaries. I am just suggesting that you evaluate. If you deal with people and you end up feeling those feelings, whenever you deal with them, there may be a sign of poor boundaries between you and that person or that situation. Ask yourself, are you able to say no? Because no is okay. And I do this little check for boundaries. Do you find yourself feeling odd? Odd is if you're over explaining to someone, if you're debating with them, if you're defending. So you're over explaining, you're telling the reason you need to do something to care for yourself. And you feel like I have to over explain that I need to care for myself. Debating, I'm going back and forth with somebody about something I need to do to care for myself and to love myself. Then defending, am I actually defending my need to do this thing that I need to do for myself to be healthy? So if you're in situations when you're doing that, there are some boundaries that are not clear and that need to be clarified and that needs to be stronger. So let's talk some more about some other ways to practice self-love. So one important thing that I find I'm in conversation with people all the time about, and people are often struggle with this, is the idea of forgiveness. Forgiveness, it can hold you back if you don't. If you don't have forgiveness, practice forgiveness, it will anchor you wherever that person hurt you, you're going to be stuck right at that place. If it was 1997, you're going to be in 1997 and you're not going to be able to leave 1997. Now, remember, everything is situational. I know the challenges depending on the complexity, the severity of the offense, of how someone harmed you. But remembering forgiveness is not for them. It does not absolve that person from their wrongdoing, from the fact that they harmed you in some way, shape, or form. Absolutely not saying that. We just have to do the work, even if we, once again, are doing the work with someone professionally trained to work through that, because it will leave you stuck in a place and then you struggle with the ability to move forward and live your life in a way that represents a healthy, whole you that loves themselves. So just the idea of practicing self-love is if you know there's someone that you're struggling to forgive, and remember, forgiveness does not mean you call them up and go, oh, you remember when you said you're sorry? It's okay. Because that's kind of our phrase a lot of times. We say, it's okay. Is it really? And we have to just kind of be mindful of that. So it doesn't mean that you are on the phone with them now and going, okay, I forgive you. It's you reconciling and resolving their whatever it was that they harmed you with within yourself, for yourself, because you may never see that person again and may never get the opportunity to make amends. But ultimately, you deciding that you don't want to be stuck, you deciding that you want to live a life that allows you to move forward in a healthy way is practicing self-love. I love myself enough to not be in 1997, to figure out what do I need to do to heal? Is everything that I've done to try to do it on my own, what do I need? Divine intervention in that? Do I need the support of other resources along with my divine intervention, like a counselor, like a therapist? What's my support? What will help me get through? I love myself enough to figure out that I need support and that I have resources and I can use them. Then we have this very important idea of values. So we're talking about other ways to practice self-love. Determine your values. And this matters for you and who you are with. So understanding what your values are, and values are one's own. There goes that one's own, meaning they're personal. They belong to you. One's own judgment of what's most important to you. So when you determine what your values are, when you are looking to be in partnership with someone and their values do not match yours, then you might want to reconsider how involved you get in relationship with that person. Because we are talking today about that self-love comes before that Black love. That romantic love that you may desire, the self-love comes first. So take time to make a determination of what your values are. And sometimes we think that we have the power to change people when we get into relationship with them, and think that we can convince them to share our values. And just because they think this way and it totally goes against what I value or what I think, they'll change one day. And so we don't get into relationship with potential. We don't get into relationship of what might be or what they might do, or one day they might see it differently. We have to be very, very mindful that that may never happen. That day may never come. So be very mindful and determine what your values are. Understand it is this evaluation, this is self-assessment, this self-awareness, that if you're going to be in relationship with someone, that you have to understand these things about who you are. We ultimately teach people how to love us. And in order to teach people how to love you, you have to love yourself. You have to have standards and values and determine your worth. That even in situations where that they don't agree with what your values are, you stand firm to who you are. If trust is a value, you value trust, you value honesty, do not change that because someone else does not. So just being mindful of what your values are and being able to articulate it and understand why those things are so important to you. Practicing self-compassion is practicing self-love. I love myself because I am not going to kick myself every chance that I get. I am going to offer myself grace. I understand that I am not perfect. And I'm not going to utilize that I am not perfect line as a scapegoat to do what I want, but ultimately understanding that I can offer compassion to others, to the one I'm in relationship with. And I can also offer it to myself and provide myself that grace, the grace that comes with just being imperfect and trying to figure this life out and what we need to do. Another way that we're going to practice self-love is we're going to celebrate our wins and we're going to acknowledge our strengths. Where are we strong? And acknowledging strengths are very different than the strong Black woman idea, where it puts that pressure on you to be self-sacrificing and to not be able to balance love and care for yourself with care for others. So we're going to acknowledge our strengths. So we're quick to acknowledge how we messed up and what we did wrong, but it's okay to celebrate your wins. And to celebrate our wins, we don't put other people down. We just celebrate what we did, our accomplishments. We celebrate where we're strong. We also look at, of course, we're going to look at things we can do better. Of course, in this evaluation process, we said in the beginning, a few slides back, we're going to do that. But it's also very, very important to acknowledge where you are strong. Don't compare yourself or your relationship. And I say that, I believe when we discussed communication in the last session, I talked about comparison being the thief of joy. Comparison will rob you of everything that you could be experiencing as it relates to being joyful. Don't compare yourself or your relationship. Don't allow social media to be the just end all say all be all of what something should look like. And I mentioned before the idea of people looking at, because remember, social media is a snapshot, and seeing couples together and going, go hashtag couple goals. And what's interesting about that idea of couple goals is that you're seeing that snapshot. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors, and just being very mindful of that. So don't let what people, there's 24 hours in a day. No one's logged in 24 hours because people go to work, they sleep, they eat, and so on and so forth. So you're receiving no matter what. Even if someone posts throughout the day, they are saying, this is the portion that I want to show you. This is what you're going to see. And so if we base how we are or what our relationship looks like on those snapshots, it's a false sense of everything. And we don't want to do that. So just, you are yourself, you are unique, and don't compare yourself. We can admire people and go, wow, she is great. He's great. He achieved much. Look at him working hard. Because I know that when we see people that are working hard and doing great things, I think the mindset that we all can have is that, like, I can do it too. I too am able to work hard. I am no less than anyone walking this earth. I have the abilities and the capabilities, and I can be in my own lane, and I can be motivated and inspired, but I'm not going to compare myself and then be down on myself because I'm looking, through someone else's window. Spend time with people who love and support you. Another part of self-love is just surrounding yourself with people that just help to just nourish you and support you and love you, and are able to tell you when you're wrong, not yes people, and just can support you in your strengths and your growth, celebrate your wins with you. And so when you love yourself and practice self-love, you want to be around people that way, who are like that. So self-love and relationships, since we're talking about, the topic was Black love and self-love. And remembering love is an action word. We have to get away from the idea that love being a feeling, because sometimes you just don't feel like it. You won't. If we are to only love people or only do for people when we feel like it, there will be so many chances or opportunities or times where we don't love them then, if it's just based upon a feeling. Love is an action word, is what we do. And that's why in the conversation about self-love, we talked about it is that appreciation for yourself, and that grows based upon your action, what you do physically, what you do psychologically, what you do spiritually, right? So the doing, to building on that, the building, the more that I take care of, I say my body is strong, my body is powerful, my body deserves to, my body is a temple, my body deserves to be fed well, to be hydrated, and I'm going to treat it that way. I'm going to be in a situation where I'm intentional about treating my body good because I love myself. Then I'm going to exercise. Then I'm going to drink my water. Then I'm going to eat my meals the way that I'm supposed to because I love myself. I don't always feel like doing those things because I get lazy because I'm a human being, but love is an action word. So I do those things for myself, and I can then do for my partner. I can demonstrate love. I can model love. I can provide love. I know what it looks like. It starts within me first. And so I build it up so much in myself. I have so much to give out to. So we want to show our partners that we love them. We want to do that. We want to show and demonstrate that through action. And I don't mean action like buying the gifts and it's like it's all about that and like what you bought, what you got from me. I mean, just like that support, that nurturing, that care, that like saying, I want to learn. I'm in a relationship with you. So I want to understand your trauma. I want to understand what triggers you because I want to help support you. I don't want to do anything or say anything that I know may harm you because I love you. And that's action. That's something I'm going to do. I'm going to take the time to get to know you. And when I get to know you, then I'm able to love you the way that is best for you. Remember that another person does not define you. So like, and then many occasions, if we don't deal with the trauma, if we don't deal with grief, with loss, with hurt and heal from prior things or things within our past, then we may sometimes look to fill certain spaces within us with people. And so if you are if you're missing the love and care from your father, and then you seek it out in a relationship, that man that you're with is never going to fill the void of your father because that man is not your father. So like ultimately is working through that, getting help and support if that is an area you struggle with, but it's not seeking it within someone else because they don't define who you are. And now that if we look at it from that standpoint, it makes sense when you look at it to look at it from I can't take someone else. I can't take someone and then it makes who I am or feel something within me because that person is not that person and I'm missing the love or care from. And the same thing can go with if I'm a man, I didn't have a mother figure. I can't say, if this woman loves me, then I'm going to be better, or it's going to define me or going to fill a void or a hole within me that I'm feeling. So a person doesn't define who we are, doesn't define our experiences because we're individuals and another person is not able to do that. So we shouldn't even depend on them to do that and put this expectation that they're able to do so. Your partner can add so much to your life. It is like can enhance and just make so many things just great and can add to it. Like this is great. This relationship is great, but they are not, I underline, if I could bold, italicize it, and I should have, they're not responsible for your happiness. They can add so much. You can think about, oh, we had a great day together and I feel so happy when I'm with them. And they do so much to make me happy. And I feel happy with them when I'm around them. But it's not their responsibility because it starts within yourself. And so it's not their responsibility for you to be happy. There are so many situations where if you are lacking something within or you're struggling with something, that partner could do everything under the sun that would like every dictionary definition of trying to make somebody happy, they can do it and you can still feel unhappy because it's not their responsibility. They can enhance, they could add to, they could support, but your partner is not responsible for you being happy. And then I just wanted to kind of focus on this word really quickly, dependence versus interdependence. So sometimes we shy away from the word dependent and we go, I don't want to be dependent on anyone. And this is sometimes the issue in relationships. So we say, I don't want to be dependent. I'm independent. And so then we're like, I'm independent. I can do this for myself. I don't need anybody. I don't need, and we had that conversation with ourselves. And then we say it out loud. And then we have this wall up. I don't need anybody. I'm not going to be dependent. And I think we need to look at the word interdependence because I love the idea of that all of us, even in relationship, we just are, we rely on one another for different things, not in a way that defines us, not in a make or break way, but it's just kind of this partnership. When we think of what partnership is, we are relying on one another. We are able to provide each other something. And it's not about you're taking advantage of me and you're dependent on me, or I'm independent, I don't need you. It's not. It's like, hey, I got something that I want to give. I have this love. I have this like joy. I want to share it with you. You have this too, or you have this thing. Let's come together. Let's rely on, let's support one another. That's what partnership is. And so ultimately, even in marriage, for example, when you have a family and children, there's a lot of interdependence. So this partner is doing this, and they're here taking care of this duty. And because they take care of this duty, then the other partner is doing this duty. And the two of them need, it's kind of the system where they're relying on one another to do their part. And it's not a matter of like, I don't need you because I could do this. It's a matter of, we're going to we're going to rely on each other. We're going to support one another. So just wanted to kind of bring that in. So, because a lot of it times we hear that language where people want to be independent, which I love, but not in a way where it's a fault, because it's this thing we walk around saying that we don't need anybody. And that sometimes is not conducive to a healthy relationship. And then very, very importantly, last week we talked about communication being the connector of all relationships, all human relationships. Communication connects us. So it is understanding our needs, understanding just things about ourselves, understanding where we are in our self-love journey, and being able to communicate that in partnership, teaching someone how to love us, teaching someone what, about who we are, what we struggle with, what we're working on, what are our strengths from your perspective, knowing your strengths. Sometimes we are able to, and a lot of times in my sessions, I will ask people to describe themselves in 5 words, and they're like, wait a minute, let me think, But then I go, well, tell me about your husband. Like, tell me about, like, give me 5 words for him. Oh, he's this, he's that, he's that, he's that, he's that. Boom. Tell me about your wife. She's this, she's that, she's that. Boom, easy. So it's always harder to talk about ourselves, but it's about knowing ourselves. It's not about being conceited or narcissistic. It's about knowing who we are, and then we can communicate it and articulate it and teach people about who we are so that we can better understand and support one another. So just communicating. So when we practice self-love, when we demonstrate self-love, and we come together in communication, it makes for better connections and relationships. We don't have to be in this kind of like back and forth and like headbutting because you think this about me, I think this about you. We don't have to be in that place. We can work to be an understanding, but the understanding comes first and foremost by understanding and loving ourselves. So of course, we are at that time, we are doing our reflection activity. And so what we're going to do, and this is something that it's a journal writing activity, as I usually provide for you at the end, something to write with, just something to reflect on, as we talked about self-love today and what Black love looked like. I love just the idea of just looking at how we love ourselves. I think Black love is beautiful. I love even when it's portrayed in movies. There's some inconsistencies with it a lot of times, but just kind of like just 2 people, the Black woman and Black man, who have historically faced so much adversity in relationship, have faced so much adversity and so much challenges against and threats against them being a couple and uniting in mission to carry out something together, so much that went against that. So when we see a demonstration of that love, it's beautiful. And so today I invite you to take out your journals, and we're going to write our life story down. Not a book, but just a little activity of just reflection based upon what we talked about today. So first, we're going to start off with our past, because we're in this, remember, step one for self-love was the evaluation stage. Where are we in this journey? Are we just saying we love ourselves and not really kind of practicing that? So I want you to start with your past and what challenges have you overcome? Reflect. What strengths did you develop as a result? Because when you overcome challenges, you sharpen those tools in that toolbox. You learn new skills, new talents, even through your challenges. We've overcome something in our past that we got through. So let's look at that and reflect on that. Celebrate who it made us to be, even through adversity. So what does the past look like? Because we're doing an evaluation of ourselves. Next, we're going to focus on the present. How do you see yourself right now? What do you see yourself as? How do you see yourself? Are there any current challenges? What are your current strengths? Maybe they're in connection to what you built and developed from your past situations. But like looking at yourself right now, in this moment, what life is looking like, who are you at this time? Then we're going to, of course, go to future. What would you like to see happen in the future? What would you like to see happen? And I don't want anyone to overthink it to the place where you're like, nah, but that can't happen. The question is, what would you like to see? Let's manifest some things. What would you like to see? Are you working on anything in the present connected to your future self? Is there anything that you're doing right now? It doesn't have to be, well, I'm working this job and saving this money, but it could just be working on your past trauma. And you know that the work that you're doing right now with your therapist is going to go a long way to you in a healthy relationship, to how you raise your children. So like just thinking about what would you like to see? And I know we're in a pandemic and we would have never saw this future for ourselves 2 years ago, but we're here. And so just kind of reflecting just what your story is. Your story belongs to you. How do you see yourself? Some things that you have strength in, and where you are right now. Just doing some reflection. This is an activity in positive psychology, just kind of reflecting on your past, your present, and your future. So I invite you to take your journals and just kind of do this work and kind of look at what this looks like for you in your journey of practicing self-love. So that is the end of our time. And as always, I just invite you to just absorb this information, process it, talk about it with someone, and of course, to take care of yourself, take care of each other, and be well. I will see you next time.